Enter, rejoice, and log in. Enter, rejoice, and log in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and log in.
The chalice is the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. If you have a chalice or simply a candle at home, we invite you now to light it together as we say the same words that we say each week at our fellowship.
We're the Bama kids, and we're going to be lighting the chalice for this week.
We light this flame as a symbol of new life, enlightening our way, as a symbol of the warmth in every human heart. Let the light of this flame rekindle the inner light of hope, of peace, of love. May we share that light with all people.
Good morning. I am Marie Luna, your Director of Congregational Life. Thank you for welcoming us into your home today. It is good to be together, even in this online format. If you are visiting from another Unitarian Universalist congregation, welcome. If this is your first time visiting the fellowship, I want to extend you a special welcome. I hope that you will reach out to me to get more connected. One way to do that is to join me for a newcomer breakout after this service. More information on that later. Or you're also welcome to send me an email. This morning's service is being led and supported by Reverend Christina Leone-Tracy, our senior minister, Kim Hartman, our director of religious education, Steve Seek, our music director, our wonderful musicians and singers, and Adam Robinson, our AV tech. Thank you to everyone who's made this morning's service possible. This year, we're focusing on growing resilience throughout our worship services at the fellowship. And right now, we're finishing up our theme of flourishing. We hope that each of us is able to grow and flourish in this community that we have cultivated together. It is now time to settle into your space, wherever you are, to be present to this time together, even from afar.
May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today, especially our young people, and of course, our people who are young at heart. Today is our question box service. So we have a story inspired by author, philosopher, and social reformer Leo Tolstoy, who wrote a short story called The Three Questions. This version was written and illustrated by John Muth. There once was a boy named Nikolai who sometimes felt uncertain about the right way to act. I want to be a good person, he told his friends, but I don't always know the best way to do that. Nikolai's friends understood, and they wanted to help him. If only I could find the answers to my 3 questions, Nikolai continued, then I would always know what to do. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? What is the right thing to do? Nikolai's friends, Sonia the heron, Gogol the monkey, and Pushkin the dog, considered the questions. And each of them gave good advice, but their answers were more tailored to suit themselves. The boy thought for a long while. He loved his friends, and he knew that they were all trying their best to help him answer his questions. But their answers just didn't seem quite right. Then an idea came to him. I know, he thought, I will ask Leo the turtle. He has lived for a very long time. Surely he will know the answers that I am looking for. Nikolai hiked up into the mountains where the old turtle lived all alone. When Nikolai arrived, he found Leo digging a garden. The turtle was old, and digging was hard for him. I have 3 questions, and I came to ask you for help, Nikolai said. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? Leo listened carefully, but he only smiled. Then he went on with his digging. Oh, you must be tired, Nikolai said at last. Let me help you. So the turtle gave him his shovel and thanked him. And because it was easier for a young boy to dig than it was for an old turtle, Nikolai kept on digging until the rows were finished. But just as he finished, the wind blew wildly and rain burst from darkened clouds. As they moved towards the cottage for shelter, Nikolai suddenly heard a cry for help. Running down the path, he found a panda whose leg had been injured by a fallen tree. Carefully, Nikolai carried her into Leo's house and made a splint for her leg with a stick of bamboo. The storm raged on, banging at doors and windows. The panda woke up. Where am I? She said, and where is my child? The boy ran out of the cottage and down the path. The roar of the storm was deafening. Pushing against the howling wind and drenching rain, he ran further into the forest. There, he found the panda's child, cold and shivering on the ground. The little panda was wet and scared, but alive. Nikolai carried her inside and made her warm and dry, and then he laid her in her mother's arms. Leo smiled when he saw what the boy had done. The next morning, the sun was warm, birds sang, and all was well with the world. The panda's leg was healing nicely, and she thanked Nikolai for saving her and her baby from the storm. At that moment, Sonia, Gogol, and Pushkin arrived to make sure that everyone was all right. Nikolai felt a great peace within himself. He had wonderful friends, and he had saved the panda and her child. But he also felt disappointed. He still had not found the answers to his 3 questions. So he asked Leo one more time. The old turtle looked at the boy. But your questions have been answered, he said. They have? Asked the boy. Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig my garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cries for help in the storm. Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging in the garden. The most important one at the moment was me, and the most important thing to do was to help me with my garden. Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time that you spent mending her leg and saving her child. The most important thing to do was to take care of them and make them safe. Remember then that there is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is always the one that you are with. And the most important thing to do is to do good for the one who is standing at your side. For these, my dear boy, are the answers to what is important in this world. This is why we are here. Asking questions is a big part of being a Unitarian Universalist. Our fourth principle calls us to ask questions throughout our lives. Sometimes, like in our story, our questions may open doors to profound insights. So as we begin our new week, let's try to remember that all earnest questions are important. Sometimes we get answers from friends. Other times, the answers are right before us, and we need only look with our hearts.
We will soon hand out diplomas to our graduating students, but first I will deliver a short 80 to 90-minute speech. This is my third graduation speech if you don't count the one I gave in high school, and I would ask as a favor that you please not count the one I gave in high school. My first year as dean, I gave a speech about time, and last year I talked about sin. When people started asking me what I would talk about this year, I usually just replied, "That's a good question." And then I finally realized, well, that's a lame answer, but it's actually a good topic for a speech. So today, I'd like to talk with you about the beauty and power of good questions. To be specific, the title of my speech is 3 Suggestions About Asking and Hearing Good Questions, including 5 examples of essential questions, plus a bonus question at the end, the correct answer to which is, I did. Next year, I plan to talk about the importance of using good titles for speeches. Before we get to the question phase of this talk, I'd like to say a few words about this year. It's been an eventful, maddening, beautiful, tragic, uproarious, joyous, and hilarious year, both within HGSE and outside of it, which is to say it has been another year in our lives. So posing good questions is harder than it might seem, and I say this not simply by way of explaining why I asked the wrong question at the dance. It's hard because asking good questions requires that you see past easy answers and focus instead on the difficult, the tricky, the mysterious, the awkward, and sometimes the painful. But I suspect that you and your listeners will be richer for the effort, and that this will be true in both your professional and your personal lives. The second question was hostile. It wasn't even a question, really. It was an insult. You will get, if you haven't already, some hostile questions in your life, some from strangers, others from colleagues or supervisors or parents or school board members, or even from students. The trick is to distinguish the hostile ones from the genuine but clumsy ones, because the clumsy question might really be the questioner's way of asking to get to know you better, or could just be motivated by a mixture of anxiety and ignorance. And to close the loop here, the only truly bad questions are not really questions at all. They're statements meant to be demeaning or designed to trip you up that are disguised as questions. Beware of those, denounce them, or ignore them as the occasion demands, but let your heart, your ears, and your mind remain open to all others. My final suggestion is that there are 5 truly essential questions that you should regularly ask yourself and others. My claim is that, and this is slightly outlandish as a claim, but this is a graduation speech, if you get in the habit of asking these questions, you have a very good chance of being both successful and happy, and you will be in a great position to answer "I did" to the bonus question at the end. The first is a question my kids are fond of asking, and it's one you may have heard other teenagers pose, or maybe you still pose it yourself. The question is the classic, "Wait, what?" It could be asked as, "Wait, what?" or "Wait, what?" My kids typically pose this question when I get to the point in a conversation where I'm asking them to do a chore or two. From their perspective, they hear me saying blah, 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 and then tomorrow I'd like you to clean your room. And at that precise moment, the question comes, wait, what? Clean what? Wait, what is actually a very effective way of asking for clarification, which is crucial to understanding. It's a question you should ask before drawing conclusions or before making a decision. The Dean of Harvard College, Rakesh Khurana, gave a great master class this year where he emphasized the importance of inquiry over advocacy. It's important to understand an idea, in other words, before you advocate for or against it. The wait, which precedes the what, is also a good reminder that it pays to slow down to make sure you truly understand. The second question is I wonder, which can be followed by why or if. So I wonder why or I wonder if. Asking I wonder why is the way to remain curious about the world, and asking I wonder if is the way to start thinking about how you might improve the world. As in, I wonder why our schools are so segregated, and I wonder if we could change this. Or I wonder why students often seem bored in school, and I wonder if we could make their classes more engaging.
We sing like children wandering by the shore, gathering pebbles colored by the waves. Oh, the great sea of truth from sky to sky stretches before us, boundless unexplored.
Good morning. When I saw the services list coming up and saw the question box service needed a worship leader, I quickly spoke up and said, I'll take that one. And I did this for several reasons. I enjoy hearing all the questions that are presented to Reverend Christina. They come from people of all ages, and every year there is always a good variety of subjects the questions ask about. And it's fun to watch Reverend Christina come up with the answers on the spot with little time to prepare. This takes skill to come up with answers that are accurate and appropriate for the situation. People who are good at this make it look easy. Another reason that I enjoy this service is because a big reason I belong to the fellowship is I always ask questions even at a young age. I would ask my parents all kinds of questions like, why did you have me 8 years after my brother? Why did you put me in a private school when my sisters and my brother all went to public schools and turned out very successful? And hey, Mom, they told me the planet was only this many years old at school, but the encyclopedia says it's this old. Who's right? Even as a youngster, I enjoyed watching my parents try to come up with answers to questions that made them uncomfortable. I knew I was in a place that didn't fit with my vision of where I belonged. The power of questions is underestimated. A story I recently read in the Washington Post on May 6th was about a hijacker armed with a rifle boarded a school bus in Columbia, South Carolina, and it was carrying 18 children, and he demanded the driver go to the next town 15 minutes away. Then the kids started peppering the man with questions, one after another. Were you a soldier? Why are you doing this? Are you going to hurt us? What about our driver? Sensing more questions coming, the man told the driver to stop and got off the bus. The driver could sense he had had enough of the questions. Fortunately, no one was hurt, and the man was apprehended shortly after leaving the bus. It seems that, at least in this case, Tragedy was averted because of the natural curiosity of kindergartners. Our fourth guiding principle is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. It was because of my search for truth and meaning that I found the fellowship, who welcomed me, and I was able to discover what I am here. I discovered that I am an agnostic, which is someone who does not know whether or not God exists. A weak agnostic does not know if there is a God, but may feel that they are still weighing evidence or will receive more evidence. A strong agnostic believes it's ultimately unknowable whether or not God exists. I'm somewhere in between, and that's okay. I feel welcome here in the fellowship and free to ask questions. The church I grew up in, questions were shunned and considered inappropriate. We were expected to take their word as gospel. That never sat well with me, so I never felt comfortable and kept asking questions. Soon, you will all have a chance to ask a question of your own. Our sermon today is a question box, but because we are on Zoom, we ask that you submit your questions via the chat box. You can send them as a private message directly to Reverend Christina or make them visible to everyone, but Steve will now play for a minute or two to allow those questions to come in. Thank you for your presence here today and for your questions.
Hey everyone, thank you for your questions. I'm just going to take one more minute to jot them down here so that I don't have to keep track of the chat box. So just give me one moment while I do that. And if you haven't asked your question yet, you might be too late because I don't think I can keep jotting these questions down. Okay, these are excellent questions. And there's so many. And as always, I'm going to do my best to answer as many as I possibly can. while giving each answer as much time as they need. And if I don't get to them all, then perhaps we'll get to them in another sermon. Sometimes these make wonderful sermons or scroll articles. So keep your eyes out for those things as well. Okay, let's see. Okay. Nate asked the question, what is my favorite comic strip? And I would start with that one because that's a fun one. We'll start fun. And I'm going to say my favorite comic strip is probably Peanuts. I just really love Snoopy. And although, you know, I didn't like it when they made it into movies because I feel like all the friends are kind of mean to Charlie Brown. But in the comic strip, I don't feel like it's quite that way. So that's my answer for that one. This one is often asked at question box services, and it's a great one. And it's one that we can never answer enough, is the question about what is my elevator speech, which is the idea of how do you explain Unitarian Universalism in a short amount of time. And that happens to all of us, especially when we're talking to friends or family or new people at parties or something like that, which hopefully we'll be able to do more often coming up soon. And people say, you know, so where do you go to church, or what religion are you? And you say, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. And usually people don't know what that means. And so how do we explain it briefly? And I like to start, first of all, by taking some assessment of who I'm talking to. So if I know for sure that this person I'm talking to is a Christian, then, you know, I want to try to find some way in without putting them off. So I usually start with our history, and I say something like, Unitarianism and Universalism used to be two Christian denominations, and when they came together in the 60s, they created something new. So some folks in our congregations are Christian, but you don't have to be Christian to be a part of our community. So that's my little in. So that history of Unitarianism, the belief that God is one and not three, and Universalism, the idea that God is love and that no one would go to hell. So maybe I would include that in my elevator speech. And then I usually say something like, we come together and agree to challenge each other and support each other on our different faith journeys. So we might all have different beliefs as we sit next to each other in our community, but we all agree on how we're going to live and try to make the world a better place through what we call our 7 principles. So it might sound something like, Unitarianism and Universalism used to be two Christian denominations. Unitarianism believed that God is one, not 3 parts, and Universalism believed that God is love. And when they got together in the 60s, they created something new. So people in our congregations can be Christian, but don't have to be. We have lots of different beliefs among ourselves. And rather than focusing on what it is that we believe, we agree to come together to challenge and support each other so that we can all be on our own faith journeys together and help each other make the world a better place and live our lives in ways that are good and helpful for us. So that might be how I would answer that question. Ask me again next year, it'll probably be slightly different. But sometimes people like to emphasize our focus on justice. Sometimes people like to focus on our welcome of people of all genders and sexualities. Depending on who you're talking to, you might want to tweak your answer. So I try to do that as well. All right, let's see. We've been through a lot of transitions in recent years, which can feel tiring and scary. How can we support each other through this? And I'm assuming that this question means we at the fellowship have been through a lot of transitions. And I'm going to draw on a previous congregation I served, which also went through a lot of transitions and was preparing for even more big transitions. And someone asked me this question at the question box there as well. And I just really encouraged the congregation, and I encourage us as well, to recognize that change is life. That all the time things are changing. Even if things sort of feel stable, there's always something changing, whether it's the weather outside, or we're aging and growing, or new people are coming into our community, or people are leaving. We're always shifting and changing. And I think if we're all going to hold on and wait until it stops changing, we're going to hold on and wait for a really, really long time. So I think it behooves us to lean into that change so that we can be, so that it doesn't have to feel so off balance and scary. It can feel just like a natural, healthy part of life and growth. And I would venture to say that change is not going to stop. Reverend Leah and her family are leaving. Reverend Leah's ministry is going to end. Allie is going to come back to us. Allie will eventually leave within a year. We don't know who will come next. And I think, hopefully I get to stay for a long, long time, but we don't know how long that next person will stay. And things are just going to keep changing. So as long as we can just continue to recognize that we, as the fellowship, are not necessarily our leaders. We are the people, and we are the vision and the values that make up this place, because even the people come and go. That is the core. And as long as we can hold on to that core, that is what can keep us stable. And then one of the parts of this question was, how can we support each other through this transition? And I think, I don't know a particular answer to how, but I think it's necessary that we do support each other, and recognize that we need to continue to lean into the fellowship, and support each other regardless of transitions that are happening, as part of the fellowship life. So I hope that we'll continue to do that. There were several questions about our congregation in particular. How healthy is our congregation now? Do you see our fellowship continuing to grow? What is one hope you have for the fellowship in the coming year? So this is a tricky time to ask these questions, because we're hopefully at the end of the many, many, many months of this pandemic. Today, I spent the morning kind of cleaning out my office and rearranging it in preparation for moving my desk back. My desk has been in my bedroom for over a year at my home, and I'm ready to move it back to the building. And I was realizing that just so much has happened in the last 15 months. I'm sitting in our legacy room right now, which is in our fellowship building. And the last time I had a meeting in here, we were getting ready to shut down our building. So it's hard to know exactly where our fellowship stands right now. I have faith and some evidence to believe that we're in a good place, that a solid core of people have been continuing to come online throughout the whole pandemic, that a whole chunk of people are wanting to be a part of our online programs, but just can't make the time, or they have young children and that's hard. And anytime we reach out to them, they say, oh, we just miss it so much and we can't wait till we're back in person. So we believe that there's a lot of people who are just sort of waiting to return. And then we've also reached out to some new folks. There's a handful of people on this call right now who have never seen the inside of our building. And we can't wait to continue to welcome you into our space and into this community, even as you've become a part of it while we've been online. So we will continue to have our offerings both online and in person when we're able to regather in person. And so that will that will be a change from the before times. But again, one of those changes, that life is change, and we're just going to keep it going so that we can continue to welcome those people who are far away, people who can't make it into the building, who are sick or have limited mobility, and then also regather in person so that we can have that time face-to-face for those of us who want that. So we're hoping to plan some events this summer that can allow people to come and visit and be in person outdoors and maybe a little bit indoors as well. But I just want to reiterate that we will likely not be having in-person Sunday services until the fall. And I recognize that some congregations in our community are reopening this summer. Unfortunately, those congregations have a lot more staff than we do, and your staff really, really needs this summer to recuperate, plan, and focus on doing reopening well. And so I just ask your patience and grace while we're getting everything ready, and also taking some much needed time off during this summer. Let's see, one hope I have for this coming year for the fellowship is that we will be able to capitalize on regathering in person and creating this sort of hybrid model for our worship and programs to allow us to really decide or re-engage with who we are as a people. So that's one of my big hopes for the coming year. And our governing board will be leading us through a visioning and mission process. The last time we did that was 5 years ago, which was right before I arrived as your senior minister. And it's time in our cycle to do that. And it's also just time in our world to do that. So we're really excited to be able to do that. And then we're also, I'm just hoping that that's a perfect time for us to do it, to come back together, to remember why we love our community and be able to articulate it. Let's see. Will our services be different? I just mentioned a little bit about how they'll be different, that they'll be both online and in person. And yes, my assumption is that they will be different than what they were in the past, partly to allow for a truly inclusive experience for those who are at home and those who are in the building. We don't want to prioritize, overly prioritize one group over the other. We don't want to say, we're going to stick a video camera in the back and make it, if you come online, that you're just sort of a fly on the wall. We want you to be a part of the community as well. Likewise, we don't want the people in the room to feel like they're just watching something they could have watched at home. So we're trying to figure out how to do that well. And then, yeah, so sorry, I'm occasionally seeing things pop up on the chat box, but we're trying to figure out how to do that well. So things will probably look different than they did in the before times, but there will also be a lot of things that feel the same. There was a question about God. Do I believe that God is the Judeo-Christian idea of God as a personal higher power, or do I see it as a symbol of positive things? Like my elevator speech, I would say that changes from day to day. I don't know that I personally ever view God in the traditional view from Jewish and Christian scriptures. Although the view in Jewish and Christian scriptures of God is wildly different from book to book. So there's lots of different understandings of God, even within the Bible. But I would personally say, if I use the word God, I often try to explain what I mean, but often I'm talking about that power which is so much greater than us that we can't explain it. Some people call it the universe or the cosmos. Some people call it energy. I believe that God exists in the energy and relationships between us. And so I use the word God often symbolically. But I also think it's really a powerful word, and one that we should be able to use and claim. And so, but often people get hung up on the idea that the word God could only mean one possible thing, and it's a man with a white beard in the clouds. And I want us to be able to be flexible with that word. So usually when I use the word God, and I don't that often, but when I do, I try to explain what I mean. And often I'm using it historically to talk about when the Unitarians believed this about God, or the Universalists believed this about God, and how we can sort of take that understanding today. So I hope that helps. There were two questions about racial justice. One, how we might pursue racial justice today. And the other one was a question about how we might let the wider Fox Cities community know about why the Ongiri family is leaving and the ways that they experienced racism and homophobia here in our community, and that that's a piece of their wanting to leave, which Leah stated really beautifully in the letter that she sent out to the congregation. If you didn't see that, it's also, I think, on our website under Associate Minister Transition. So with that question, I don't have a great answer. And if I were to make one up, it wouldn't be honest. But I would say I think it does make sense to try to let people know. I know who asked this question, and they suggested to me that maybe it would be safer to wait until the Ongiris left, so that it didn't blow back on them in any way. And I think that may make sense. We don't need to make a big deal about it until they're safely in Portland. I think it's something that either we can just do organically and by word of mouth, sharing questions with each other, sharing comments with our friends, or letting our neighbors know, the ways in which this has impacted our fellowship community personally. I also think that it might make sense at some point to reach out to some of our community leaders to get their advice about how we could make this personal story known more explicitly, and maybe through our city hall, maybe through the newspaper. I don't exactly know. But I think it's a great idea, a good thought, that it's one thing to say like racism is real, but to say it's impacted personally our community is more powerful. And our governing board talked a month or two ago about, if we were to ever recruit another minister or staff person who was a person of color, or partnered with a person of color, would we need to offer reparations of some kind? Not to tell that person that they should not come to this community, but to say, if you do come, we would pay for you to have ongoing therapy to help make that a more easier transition, or something like that. And I think that's a really wise way to think about this question. So not a gatekeeping mechanism, but actually an opening and inclusivity mechanism that could be supportive. Man, we're out of time. There's so many good questions. I would love to talk about the question about how to help kids who are afraid of death. My short answer is to just normalize it. Depends on the kid's age, but just to talk about it as a normal, healthy part of life, that if people didn't die, we wouldn't have room on the planet for babies. But there's different kinds of death. There's natural death from age, and then there's also more traumatic death from accidents or illness. And those require different answers. So I don't have time for that now, but if you want to ask me, send me an email and ask me that question. I'd love to talk to you about that. That's something I used to talk to medical chaplains about. I used to give a lecture on how to talk to children about death. So, and yeah, there's just so much here. But thank you. Thank you for your questions, and I'll go back and try to find find them and see if I can answer them in scroll articles or anything else. If you personally had a question that you just actually want an answer to, not just in the context of this service, feel free to email me and I'll see if I can do my best to answer it. But of course, I'm not the only one with answers, and other folks in our chat box and in our community have been answering them as well. So thank you so much.
Sing of praises for the journey, pilgrims we who carry on. Searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, my God for present and time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest. Look inside your souls, the kindling of the heart that will bend you. Find the Spirit always present. Find it in each mind and heart. Touch and hold that ancient yearning, kindling for a newfound truth. Stand we now upon the threshold, facing futures yet unknown. Hearth behind us, wayside hostel, built by those who knew wild roads. God, we ere their sacred embers carried in our minds and hearts.
Sharing our individual joys and concerns helps us collectively grow resilience. I invite you now to type into the chat box any personal news that you wish to share with our community so that we can hold space with you. If you would like to connect further with one of our ministers or a care team member, please reach out directly. You can also submit joys and concerns on our website or through a member of staff to be included in our weekly email. Let us breathe into this shared silence and then join our sung response.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer.
This month, we're focusing on flourishing. And so now, as we take part in our morning offering, it is a time to imagine a flourishing of generosity. What would that flourishing look like? What would it feel like? What would it mean to have an abundance in spirit and in resources? We invite you into that contemplation of flourishing and invite you to make it real. We know that there are always those among us who are in need. We are here to help. It is why we exist as a fellowship, to be here for you when you need us. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Reverend Christina, Reverend Leah, if you are in need of financial or emotional support so we can offer help. We want to also honor that there are those among us with resources to share and an abundance to offer. Our community is gathering virtually, but our expenses are real. If you have never donated to the fellowship or haven't in a while, please do so that our ministries might be able to continue to flourish for the months and years to come. As you hear these words from Suzanne Marnuka, think about why you are a part of the fellowship and why you give. And then please do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Justin Fisher, and I've been going to the fellowship for about 4 years. And I have kept going even during the pandemic because I really find the services to be uplifting and inspirational in this time of challenge. And I support the fellowship because, I mean, one of many reasons is I really feel like I belong in this community, and that's kind of the first time I've really felt that way. So it's really something that I enjoy and love.
As we come to the end of this service, we will extinguish our chalice flame, even as we still hold its light in our hearts. As we extinguish this flame, let us go our ways with hope in our hearts, with our spirits renewed, and with a deeper understanding of life's mystery. Let us carry the light of compassion and commitment to build a better world. After our closing words, we will be having small breakout groups for conversation. In a moment, we will hear a short postlude song, and if you do not want to participate in any small group conversations, then please just use that postlude music time to log off and leave this Zoom meeting. If you choose to stay, you'll be invited to choose your own breakout group on Zoom. One option will be for newcomers to join our Director of Congregational Life, Marie Luna, in a special newcomer group. A second option will be for someone to join someone from our care team if you would like to share more personally and deeply about whatever is on your heart. One group will be led by our worship leader, Dave, about the power of asking questions. Another group will be led by Reverend Christina, me, about what it means to be a faith grounded in wonder and curiosity. And one final group will just be for informal, unmoderated chit-chat. If you have any trouble selecting your group, just stay here and we will do our best to help you in a moment. And with that, go in resilience, growing in strength. Go in flourishing, opening up to beauty and joy. Go in peace, knowing that we embrace each other, even now, from a distance.